My name is Chris Murphy, and I want to welcome all you guys for 2 hours of big fun with Excel. Today we're going to start with the basics, and as Kay mentioned, we're going to be doing another Beyond the Basics session coming up here. But I want to welcome all of you guys. I'm going to ask you, first of all, please turn off or turn down your cell phones. Try to resist the temptation to do too much web surfing or updating your Facebook page or whatever in the middle of class. And if you could minimize the side conversations, that'd be greatly appreciated. We're running tonight from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Okay, and I think we're just going to go straight through. We'll just, since we only have I've got a lot of stuff I want to share with you guys, and we don't have that much time. So just a quick overview of Excel. This is the basics, so we're going to just, some of you guys mentioned you've never used Excel. I just want to fill in all those holes for you guys. So as you may or may not know, Excel is a spreadsheet program that's part of Microsoft Office. We use it to create workbooks. Workbooks are basically collections of different spreadsheets. You can use Excel to analyze and organize information and make smarter business decisions. You can use Excel to track your data. You can use it to create models to do analysis. We can write formulas to create calculations. Several of you guys mentioned pivot tables, which are one of the powerful tools for being able to summarize large data sets. And then we can also do some nice looking charts to interpret numeric information graphically. So Excel files, as I mentioned, are stored as workbooks. They have that extension XLSX. If you get a file from somebody, you see a file on a network drive with that extension, it's an Excel file. And just like a real book, Excel workbooks can have many pages or many different sheets. And each of these pages, each of these sheets is gigantic. We've got over 16,000 columns. Each one is marked with a letter. And we have over 1 million rows, and each of those rows is marked with a number. And at the intersection of each of those columns and rows is what we call a cell. Okay, so each of those cells has a unique address based on the column, letter, and the row number. So if I jump over to Excel here, first of all, I'm running Excel on a Mac today. Some of you guys I can see are running PCs. One of the good thing about the current version of Excel on both the Mac and the PC, they're pretty similar. There's some minor differences, but in older versions, the PC version was over here and the Mac version was here. So even if you're using a PC tonight, you should be able to follow along, or some of you guys start working in an office where they're just using PCs rather than Macs. It's pretty easy to switch back and forth between the different versions on the Mac and the PC. Michael, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I saw that there was a huge number of rows that were available, but not that many as compared to columns. I'm kind of wondering why there's such a much difference.
Now when you start asking why, you getting philosophical on me, man. I don't have a good. You'd have to ask the geeks at Microsoft about that. I think mostly because people manage stuff in lists, and we don't have, usually when you think about a list of information, we don't have as many columns as we typically have rows. And actually, as a practical matter, there's like over 1 million rows, but I talk to people all the time who work with these crazy big data sets, and once you get down there to like a quarter or 500,000 rows, theoretically you can load them in, but then load that much data in, but then when you're actually trying to do anything with it, as a practical matter, it just bogs the machine down. But I don't have a good answer why they have more columns than rows. I'll have to check with some guys at Microsoft and see if I can't get it. I don't have a magic wand or better answer on that. But when you first fire up Excel, I've just started Excel, and when you first fire up the program, you can start with a blank workbook, or there's a whole bunch of cool templates that come with the program. Templates, as you may know, are pre-built files, and the examples that come with Excel are really cool for getting ideas of things that you can do with Excel. So I'd encourage you to explore those later on. There's a tour. There's a whole bunch of different templates for doing all kinds of cool stuff in Excel. Tonight, though, we're going to just start from scratch. So if you've just fired up Excel and you're at the start screen here, go ahead and just click on Blank Workbook. And that will, you can double click on that or click on Create, and that will start up a blank Excel workbook. So let me max out the window here. And check it out. When you first fire up a brand new Excel spreadsheet, unless you've clicked somewhere else, we're in column A, row 1. So that cell has the address of A1. And the cell addresses are important because we can use those we can reference those cell addresses to create formulas. And I'll show you some examples of that. And you can see here also down at the bottom, when I first create a brand new workbook, unless you've customized Excel, usually you only have one page or one sheet, but we can create additional sheets, which we'll be doing later on just by clicking on the plus button there. I'm going to use the zoom features in the lower right corner here to zoom in so you guys will be able to see better what I'm doing here. Again, I just want to continue with some overview, big picture concepts here. So we can use these cell addresses to reference other cells. Each cell can contain different kinds of information. We can store text, or what some people call labels. We can also store numeric information, or what some people call values. And then once you've got some text and some numbers in cells, you can start to have some fun, because then you can create formulas. We can do basic math calculations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and so on, to solve some formulas. And then also a really cool feature in Excel are functions that are built into Excel. There's hundreds of different, essentially pre-written formulas to do all kinds of math calculations, financial calculations, statistical analysis, engineering analysis. We've got functions to manipulate text as well. So the functions are one of the really powerful features of Excel, and I'll show you some basic examples in tonight's session, and then in the intermediate class we get deeper into some of the functions. Another piece of jargon you want to know about is when we refer to a group of cells, they're called a range of cells. Okay, so there's several different ways to perform keyboard shortcut, or to perform commands in Excel. We've got the ribbon at the top, also the quick access toolbar. There's keyboard shortcuts, and then some mini toolbars. So at the very top of your screen is what's called the ribbon, and it organizes the different kinds of commands that you can perform in Excel. So unless you've clicked somewhere else, when you first start Excel, you're on the Home tab, and you can click on some other tabs to get to some of the different commands that are available. So on each tab, there's different groups of commands which are related commands. So for example, if you're on the Home tab, you can see the first group is the clipboard group here. Okay, and then within each group there's different commands to perform the operations that you want to in Excel. They've tried to design it so the commands that you use most frequently are easy to find. And then this is important, some commands show up only when they're needed. In Excel, just like the other Office programs, we have what are called contextual tabs. And what that means is certain tabs will only show up in context when they're needed. So for example, I've got some chart tools that only show up when I've got a chart selected, or I've got some table tools that only show up when I'm in a table. Now, not all the commands fit on the ribbon, so you'll notice in the lower right corner of some of these groups there's these little icons with the arrow, and those are dialog box launchers. You can click on those and get access to a dialog box that will give you more options than are available up on the ribbon itself. One thing that's kind of cool, you can double click on one of these tabs to minimize the ribbon. So let me just show you. You haven't worked with that before. You know, I've got, like right now I zoomed in, I've got about 23 lines of stuff here. If I click on one of my tabs, oops, at the top here, that just minimizes the ribbon, so I can see a few more lines of my spreadsheet. And I see people do that all the time in class, and they try to figure out, where did my ribbon go? So you can just click on a tab again to get it to drop down so you can see it all the time. So in addition to the ribbon, to perform commands on the ribbon, you can also see in the upper left corner of your screen, there's what we call the quick access toolbar. And as that name suggests, that gives you fast access to some commonly used commands. So when you first open Excel, unless you've customized the quick access toolbar, it's got the save command, the undo command, and the redo command. Okay, and you can also customize that quick access toolbar. If you click on the drop down arrow to the right of the quick access toolbar, it gives you some other commands that you can turn on so you can get to those more quickly. And then you can add any command that's available in Excel to that quick access toolbar so you can get to it faster just by clicking where it says more commands. that'll open up a dialog box where you can find all kinds of commands in Excel and then just click on them and add them to the quick access toolbar. I'm just going to cancel out of this right now without making any changes. Okay, so we've got the ribbon. We've also got the quick access toolbar to get to commands that you need real quickly. And then also we've got keyboard shortcuts. And actually the keyboard shortcuts on the this is really more of a for the PC version of Excel, where we got these keyboard shortcuts. But some of the on the Mac, we've got keyboard shortcuts for some of the commands. I'll go over those as we get into this. For example, the letter B for bold will make your text bold. You can also use the command key with a letter to perform some of the keyboard shortcuts. So in addition to that, we also have what they call mini toolbars and shortcut menus. So you can just point at something and right click on it and you'll get some commands that show up. So that's kind of cool. The mini toolbars and shortcut menus are what they call context sensitive. So it depends on what I'm pointing at. If I just right click on a cell, I get some commands related to doing operations in a cell. If I right click, for example, on a column heading, I'll get some other commands specific to working with a column. Okay, so I always tell people, if you're not sure where a command is in Excel, point at something that you want to change, click the right mouse button and see what shows up, and there's a pretty good chance that the command that you want to perform is going to be right there. All right, so let's see. Now, below the ribbon, there's what we call the formula bar, and it's got several different pieces to it. On the left side, there's what's called the name box. We also have this insert function button, which is cool. It opens up a feature that makes it easy to build some of the functions that are available in Excel. We're going to get deeper into that in the intermediate class. And then we've also got this formula bar text box where we can view or edit the contents of different cells in the program. So as we go through this stuff, I want to make sure you guys feel comfortable asking questions, okay? So we're just kind of setting the stage here, but there's no dumb questions, so jump in at any point with questions, okay? And if you've got a question, don't be shy about it. Sometimes in these classes, people will shy about asking a question, but if you've got a question, there's probably a shy person who's got the same question, so ask the question for the shy person. All right, so the most important command is the undo command. So on the PC it's Control Z, on the Mac it's Command Z. This guy going over the cliff here wishes he had an undo command right now. One of the cool things about the new version of Excel is, on the PC it's always the Control key, and on the Mac it's always the Command key. But on the new version of Excel in 2016, you can use either one. So you can actually use the Control key instead of the Command key, instead of, and remember to jump back and forth between those. So enough talk about all this stuff here. Let's go ahead and build some spreadsheets. So let's just do like the world's simplest spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and just click my cursor in cell A1, and I'm just going to type in the word revenue. So notice as I type in my text, it shows up in the cell, and it also shows up on the formula bar up at the top of the screen. So I'll go ahead and press the Enter key to complete that. And then in the next cell here, my cursor moves down to row 2. I'm just going to type in expenses, and I'd encourage you guys to follow along and go ahead and do this stuff. We'll do this stuff together. So type in expenses, and then in row 3, I'll just type in the word profit. Okay, so I'm just typing some text or some labels in column A. Now I'm going to jump over to column B, and I want to type in some numbers. So I can use my arrow keys on the keyboard, or I can take my mouse and just navigate to another cell here and just click. Okay, so let's say my revenue is $12,345. Press enter, and then my expenses are $9,876. So I want to do a calculation now. I want to figure out what my profit is. That's going to be revenue minus expenses. So let me just demonstrate a few things, and then we'll talk about how to create formulas. If I just type in, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minus 9876, and I press enter, Excel just shows that just as I typed it in. It doesn't know whether that's a product ID number or an employee number or whatever, so it just displays that. So a really important concept you need to remember in Excel, anytime you want to do a formula, you want to start it with an equal symbol. Okay, so I'm going to undo what I just did. So I'll just use Control Z or Command Z to blank that out. So I'm going to type in the same expression, except this time I'll start with an equal symbol. So type in equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minus 9, 8, 7, 6. And when I press enter, cool, I get the answer. So you'll notice here when in the cell, it shows me the actual result of the calculation. But if I go back to the cell, and I look up on the formula bar at the top of the screen, it shows me the actual contents versus what the result is. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys how you can just hard code numbers into Excel. You can do a formula that way, but usually that's not best practice, because now if I go change my revenue number or I change my expense number, I'm going to have to redo the formula. So typically what you'd want to do, rather than hard coding a formula like this, is you would want to make reference to the cell. So what is the cell that has the revenue number in it? B1. And what's the cell that has the expense number in it? B2. So you could type that formula in the cell. You could type in equal B1 minus B2, but let me do an undo. I'm going to do Control Z again. And a more intuitive way to build formulas instead of typing in the cell addresses is to just click on the cells. So I'm going to start a formula, so I'm going to start with what character? Equal. Just seeing if anybody's paying attention. Okay, yeah, equal. And then instead of typing in B1, I'm just going to take my mouse and point at the revenue number. So I click on that, and that just picks up that cell reference. So after I've clicked on cell B1, now I'm going to type the minus symbol to subtract, and then I'll click on my expense number. Okay, so there's my formula, B1 minus B2. So instead of having to think of the cell addresses, I just clicked on the cells, and makes it pretty intuitive to use that pointing method to create a formula. So that's it. I'll go ahead and press the enter key, and I get the same result as I got before, but now if I go ahead and I type in another revenue number, I'll type in 15,432 or whatever. As soon as I do that and then press enter, it recalculates my formula. So that's the power of Excel, the ability to create a formula and then change the input values, and it recalculates that. All right, so some of you guys I know have done some stuff with Excel, so hopefully we're not boring you so far. But the guys who are just getting started with Excel, hopefully this gives you a good foundation. Anybody have any questions on any of the basics, anything we've done so far? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let's do something more complex. This is like the world's simplest spreadsheet. Let's do something a little bit more sophisticated. So check this out. If I click on a column heading, I can highlight all million rows, and if I click on a row number on the left side, I can highlight all 16,000 columns. So as you might guess, if I click in the very upper left corner of the spreadsheet, that's a way to highlight the entire thing. So if I wanted to copy all this data, change the font, or whatever, it's just a quick way to select everything here. So once I've got it all selected, I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff just by pressing the delete key on the keyboard, just because I want to start all over again. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out how to do a real basic business budget. So I'm starting all over on this sheet. I'm going to type in a title here. I'll just type in 2018 budget in cell A1, and then I'm going to press the enter key to complete that. For right now, I'm going to leave row 2 blank. I'm going to jump down to row 3. Let me zoom in a little bit more so you guys can get a real good view of this. And on row 3 here, I'm going to type in the word revenue again, and then press enter. This time I want to break out a few categories under revenue. So under the word revenue on the next line, I'll type in income, press enter, then I'll type in investments, press enter, I'll type in other, and then I'll type a row for total income, total revenue. I'm going to leave row 8 blank, and I'll type in the word expenses on row 9. I'm going to leave row 10 blank, and I'll jump down to row 11, and I'll type in profit. Okay, so just again typing in some labels here. Now we're going to get in, I'm going to do some more stuff with formatting later on, but for right now, just to make it clear to anybody who reads this spreadsheet that all the items directly under revenue are part of that category, I want to indent the items immediately under revenue. So to do that, I'm going to select those cells. I'm going to point at my income cell, then I'm going to hold the mouse down and drag down till I get down to the total row. And to indent all these items under that I've got selected underneath revenue, check out on the Home tab, there's an icon that I'm pointing at with a right pointing arrow that will increase the indent. So I just click on that and it moves all the items I have over to the right, just indicates they're part of the revenue line. All right, so now that I've got that typed in, my experience is people who use Excel are kind of neat freaks. So be honest with you, how many of you guys are bugged by the fact that investments hangs over into the second column? Does that bug you a little bit? Okay. So yeah, you can adjust the width of a column or the height of the row. There's, like everything else in Excel, there's always more than one way to do that. One option is if you point at the divider bar between column headings, your cursor shows as a two-way arrow, and you can use that to click and drag to the right to make the column wider, or click and drag to the left to make it narrower. But check it out, in most cases what you want is a column that's just wide enough for the widest item. So a cool trick is just to point at the divider bar between column headings and do a double click. If I double click, it will do what we call an auto fit and make the column just wide enough for the widest item. And that's cool. Even if I had like 500 or 5,000 rows of data and I couldn't see all the stuff, it would just automatically do all of them for me. And you can do that with more than one column. In this case, I've just got stuff in column A, but if I highlighted, like if I dragged across 4 columns and then I just double clicked on the divider bar between any of those columns, it would adjust all of them. So you don't need to do the columns one at a time to adjust the width. All right, are we doing okay so far? Kind of, sort of. Some shrugs, some yes, some nods, okay. All right, so I'm going to do a quarterly budget. So I'm going to bug my cursor in cell B2, and I'll just type in Q1 for quarter 1, okay, and press enter. Now, I don't want to have to type in the other quarters, so check this out, Gesundheit. So check this out, if you get your cursor in the lower, after you've typed in Q1 here, you notice before you guys, when I'm in the middle of a cell, my cursor shows with a white plus symbol. But if you put your cursor on that little dot that's in the lower right corner of the cell, your cursor changes from a white plus symbol to a black plus symbol. So what your cursor looks like and where you position it makes a big difference in Excel. So when you put your cursor in the lower right corner of a cell, they call that the fill handle. Okay, and it's got some really powerful things. So check this out. With my cursor in the lower right corner of this cell, I'm going to hold the mouse down and drag over to column C and column D and column E, and when I let go, Excel has done the quarters for me. So it's smart enough if you type in Q1, or if you type in QTR1 or the full word quarter 1, it's smart enough to recognize that you're probably trying to do quarters. So when you've done that, you'll notice in the lower right corner of the selection, they've got what's called a smart tag. And you'll see those smart tags pop up depending on what you're doing in Excel. They give you some different options. So check that out. If you hover and point on that little icon in the lower right corner, it gives you a drop down that gives you some other choices. So it assumed that you wanted to do the series, and it's got that check. But maybe if you just wanted to copy the characters Q1, you could choose copy cells here, or there's some other options. I might want to do a fill formatting only, for example. That would just copy the formatting of the background and not copy the content. So you'll see those smart tags pop up in different situations in Excel. Let me show you some other cool tricks that you can do with autofill. Yes, sir?
Is this just native to 2016?
Yeah. I mean, as opposed to previous earlier versions?
Yeah, because I think I wrote 2012 and it doesn't show up.
Let me see what. Oh, okay. You're on. That's 2010 on the PC, and it's not showing up. You or somebody else may have turned. There is an option if on the PC version. If you go to the File tab, Options, there is. You may have turned that off. And if you look at the options down in the bar at the top bottom here, yeah, and I think it will be under proofing. But you know what? When we at the end of class, maybe I can help you figure out what. Yeah, if you go to Autocorrect Options, I think it's underneath that. Try to go auto format as you type. Okay. Go to actions here. You know what? Let me tell you what. When we at the end of class, let me see. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it should be native, but you can turn it off. So I think you or somebody else in that machine has turned it off. So check with me after class, and we'll see if we can't figure out where the setting is to get that back.
Yeah, is it the same as the one that shows on the top right corner where fill is written?
Oh yeah, you can use it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So instead of doing what I just did, there's also on the home tab there's an option for fill, and that's another way to do to generate a series of values there as well. Yeah. Okay, let me show you some other cool things that autofill can do, you guys. I'm going to skip over some columns. I'm going to go over to the right. So maybe instead of doing a quarterly budget, I want to do a monthly budget. So if I just type in the abbreviation for January, and then get on the fill handle in the lower right corner, look for the black plus symbol, and I just drag down, I can generate a list of the months real quickly. Okay, or if I was doing, for example, a weekly schedule, I can type in, for example, Monday, and then use the fill handle and just generate the days of the week. Okay, and so here I've just done the days of the week. It gives me some autofill options here. So here I've got some other choices. Maybe I just want to do a work schedule for Monday through Friday, not the weekends. I could just choose fill weekdays, for example. So you can see how the autofill, the smart tag options show up differently depending on what we're doing. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, when I type in Jan on
Yeah.
the H2 and drag down, it's all Jan. I don't know why.
Okay, that might be, again, I think that it might be one of the settings that was changed. So see if I can't, after class, see if I can't help you figure out some of the settings may have been changed. But what I'm doing right now is what the default behavior is. So on the Mac, you might need to go and change some of the system settings there. All right. Let's see. Here's another cool trick you can do with autofill, you guys. Let me go over to another column. Sometimes you need to generate an incrementing series of numbers. So maybe you want to go 10, 20, 30, or 100, 200, 300. Here's the trick to doing that. I'm going to do a series of numbers incrementing by 100. So I'll type in 100, press enter, then I'm going to type in 200. And instead of having to type 300, 400, 500, and so on, here's the trick. If you want to generate an incrementing series, I'm just going to first highlight both of those cells. So I'm going to highlight, drag over the middle of 100 and 200, and then check it out. Once I've got both of those highlighted, now I get on the fill handle in the lower right corner and drag down, and I've got an incrementing series. Okay, so that's another kind of cool little trick you can do with autofill. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let's make up some numbers here. So I'm going to ask you guys to type in numbers for income and investments and other for all 4 quarters. So this is the really boring part of Excel. At work, if you can find somebody else to do this part, that's always the best. You just tell them, you do the data entry and I'll do the formulas, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and if you're not feeling, you type in whatever numbers you want. It doesn't really matter. If you're not feeling creative, you can just type in the same numbers that I'm typing in. So I'm just typing in some numbers and using the arrow keys. You can also hit the tab key to go over to the right. So again, it doesn't really matter what numbers you type in. Oops. Okay, so if you would, make up some numbers for income and then also for investments. And then other, which other than income and investments, what other could there be? Like lottery winnings? All right. All right, so now that we've got some numbers in there, let's take a look at some different ways to do calculations. So I'm going to go ahead and get my cursor at the bottom of the quarter one column where I want to see my total revenue. And I want to go over a couple of different ways to do this. So we could either create a formula, or we could also use a function. So let's take a look at both ways to do it. I'm going to just start by practicing a formula. So we're going to start our formula like we always do with the equal symbol. So I'll type the equal symbol on the keyboard. And after I type equal, I'm going to click on my income number. And then after I type the income number, I'm going to type the plus symbol on my keyboard. And then I'm going to click on my investment number. So now I've got this formula equal B4 plus B5. I'll type in the plus symbol again. And then I'm going to click on the Q1 other revenue number. So I've got this formula B4 plus B5 plus B6. I press enter, and that gives me my total. Okay, just similar to what we did earlier with the subtraction. So I just wanted to practice that, but in this case, we've only got 3 numbers. It's not that big a deal. But what if you had 30 rows of numbers that you need to add up, or 300 or 3,000 rows? That would be a really tedious way to spend the day, just clicking on all those cells. So I think the most common thing that people do with Excel is add up columns and rows of numbers. So they made that really easy to do that calculation. Instead of doing a formula, we can use the sum function. So I'm going to, after I've demonstrated doing the simple formula, I'm just going to do an undo. I'll just do Control Z, or I can just, or Command Z, or I can just click on the undo button up on the ribbon there. Notice, by the way, with the undo command, if I click on the down arrow to the right, it's cool because it shows me a list of all the stuff I've been doing. So you can go back a whole bunch of steps here. I only want to go back 1 step here. All right, so instead of using an addition formula, I'm going to go ahead and use the sum function. So check out, I position my cursor where I want my result to show up, and then on the Home tab, over near the upper right corner of the screen, you can see there's a button marked Autosum. So I just position my cursor where I want my result, then click on the Autosum button, and when I do that, Excel generates the sum function for me. Okay, and Excel makes a guess based on where my cursor was. So the logic, when you just click on the Autosum button, the first thing Excel is going to do is look above for a contiguous or an adjacent range of numbers. So here it found exactly what I wanted to add up. If I had some other numbers above the blank row here, it wouldn't see those. So sometimes you have to correct Excel's guess. And if Excel does not see any numbers directly above, the next thing it does is look over to the left and guesses that you want to add up some numbers to the left. So in this case, it guessed exactly what I wanted to do. So check out the syntax, as we call it, the structure of the sum function, because all of the functions that are available in Excel, I think with Excel 2016, there's over 400 functions. They all have the same structure, the same syntax. They always start with the equal symbol, then the name of the function, whether it's sum or average or count or whatever, and then in parentheses we have what they call the arguments. What part of the spreadsheet or what values do you want to perform that function on? So in this case, it guessed that I want to add up everything from cell B4 through to B6. Okay, so it uses that colon symbol to say from this cell through to this cell. Okay, so that's exactly what I want to add up. So I'm going to accept Excel's guess and press the enter key. And cool, I should get exactly the same result that I got using the addition formula, but I think you'll agree with large data sets, that's just a quicker way to get your answer rather than clicking on each individual cell. Was that fun? Are we having as much fun as you're thinking you're going to have? It's working with a bunch of numbers is kind of boring, but trying to make it a little interesting for you guys. Anybody have any questions on anything we're doing so far? Okay, so I need to get numbers for, I need to get total revenues for all my other quarters. So do you think it would work if I use the autofill handle and just dragged across?
Yeah.
Do you think so? Well, okay, well, so you're right, it will work, but let me just, right now though, in this formula, this function I've got here, it's the sum of B4 through B6. If I copy this over to the next column, over in column C, do you really want to add up the stuff from column B?
No.
No?
It does the same thing.
You think it's going to work? I think you're right. So let's go ahead and try it. So I'm going to get on the fill handle and drag over from quarter 1 over to quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. And check that out, you guys. If you go over to column C where we've got the Q2 numbers, it actually didn't exactly copy the formula. It changed the formula. It did exactly what we wanted, right? So in column B, I had the sum of B4 through B6. You can see up in the formula bar. And then if I go over to the next column there, it gives me the sum of C4 through C6. So when it copied it kind of changed the formula, or changed the function. It did exactly what we wanted. So in this case, we wanted it to change. The idea here, though, the reason that worked, let me just put an idea in the back of your mind. The reason this worked is because when you build a formula or a function in Excel, unless you specify otherwise, Excel thinks in relative terms. So it's not thinking of exactly cell B4 through B6. It's thinking in terms of where you're creating your formula, what's the relative position of these other cells that you're pointing to. So the way Excel is thinking of this function, it's thinking, oh, you want to take the number that's 1, 2, 3 rows above in the same column through the number that's 1 row above in the same column. So it thinks, that's a concept in Excel that we call relative addressing. And usually that's really cool. When we create one formula, we want to copy it, we want the formula to adjust. So I just want to put that idea of relative addressing when we build formulas and functions in the back of your mind. I'm going to throw you guys a curveball later on where I'll show you when we copy the formula, we don't want the cell addresses to change. Okay, but in this case, it did exactly what I wanted. Now, here I did one formula and then copied it across, but check it out. Let me just undo that. What I could have just highlighted all the bottom row here and then clicked on Autosum and done them all in one shot. So like everything else in Excel, there's always 2 or 3 or 4 different ways to do things. All right, so now that I've got my numbers added down, that was so much fun, let's add across. So I'm going to go ahead and bug my cursor to the right of the Q4 column heading, and I'll type in column heading here for total. Okay, and I'm going to get my cursor to the right of my income row there, and we can go ahead and just click on the Autosum button. Oops. Yeah, there we go. So in this case, because there's no numbers directly above, Excel looks to the left and guesses that you want to add up everything from cell B4 through E4. So cool, that's exactly what I want. I'll go ahead and press enter, and I've got my total income for all 4 quarters. Okay, so here's a cool trick. Instead of dragging the fill handle down to the last blank row, if I've got data in an adjacent column, I can get on the fill handle in the lower right corner where I've got my sum function, and instead of manually dragging down, cool trick, I can just do a double click. If I double click, actually, you know what? On the PC version, you can do that. On the Mac, you can't do that. So, for those of you guys who have PCs,
It happened.
there you go. Okay, so I'm not making this up, right? We'll testify. That's a trick you can't. I think on that's a little thing on the Mac. They don't have it yet, but on the PC, what's that? You got it? Okay, to work. I can't get it to work on this. I think there might be a setting on this machine I might need to. So I'm going to drag all the way down. All right, let's go ahead and make up some expense numbers here. Why don't you guys go ahead and type out some expense numbers and then just add them across. Okay, and there's the kind of a tip there. You want to usually keep your expenses less than your revenue. Some businesses are better at that than others, right? So I'll go ahead and just make up some expense numbers. Okay, and then once I've typed in some expense numbers for all 4 quarters, I'm going to use the Autosum command to add them up. So again, it guesses that I want the sum of B9 through E9. Press enter to accept that. Okay, and then we're going to calculate the profit. So we're back to what we did earlier, you guys. We just want to take our total revenue number minus expenses. So we're going to create a formula like we did earlier. I'm just going to start, as always, with the equal symbol. And then I'm going to click on my total revenue number, which is in cell B7. I want to subtract, so I'll type the minus symbol on the keyboard. And then after I type the minus symbol on the keyboard, I'm going to click on my expense number. So now I've got this formula B7 minus B9. Okay, press enter. I've got my bottom line for Q1, and then I'm going to use the fill handle and just copy across to column F. Okay. Anybody have any questions or need any help on what we're doing so far? No? All right, well, check it out, you guys. A lot of business spreadsheets are larger than this, but they're not really more complex. We're just basically adding stuff up and doing some subtraction. So you might have many more rows, more columns of data, but they're not more complex than this. So now that I've got my basic formulas going here, let's talk a little bit about formatting. So I want to dress this spreadsheet up and make it a little bit more presentable. So I'm going to go ahead and click on cell Q, the Q1 cell here, and I just want to do some formatting. So with the Q1 column heading selected here, I'm going to go up to my Home tab on the ribbon here, and I'm going to go just click on the letter B for bold, and then I think I'll also go over to the letter A, underline in red, and change the font color there. So I'll click on the drop down to the right of the letter A and red to change the color here. Pick whatever color you want. I'm going to go ahead and go with blue. Okay, so I've got my column heading formatted. Now, I probably should have had all my other column headings selected, but there's a really cool feature that's available in Excel and all the Office programs called the Format Painter. So it's a really handy tool for copying formatting from one cell to the other. And I use it all the time to quickly format spreadsheets. Sometimes I'll get a spreadsheet that somebody else has created. I need to add some content, and I just want to make the new content I'm adding look the same as the existing content in terms of colors and fonts and so on. So check this out. To copy the formatting from the Q1 cell to another cell, first I'm going to highlight the cell that's got the formatting on it. That's my example. And then on the Home tab, on the left side here, there's a little icon with a little paintbrush guy. That's the Format Painter. So I click on that, and then I move on to my workspace, and see how my cursor shows there's a little paintbrush. So I highlight my example, the formatting I want to copy somewhere else, and I click on the Format Painter, and then I can just click on the Q2 cell here, and cool, it copies the exact same formatting I've got in the first cell. So I don't need to think about what color was that, what font, and so on. So that's a real fast way to do formatting. And so if I move away though, I've lost the Format Painter. So a lot of times I want to use the Format Painter in more than one cell. So here's a cool trick. If I want to keep the Format Painter on to be able to use in multiple places, I'm going to highlight my example, and then on the Home tab I'm going to point at Format, and I'm going to do a double click. When I double click on the Format Painter, then I can click and drag across the top row here. Notice now the Format Painter stays on. It didn't turn off immediately because I did a double click when I turned it on. And I can just click on, for example, revenue, expenses, and profits. So it's just a quick way to copy the formatting to a bunch of different cells in a worksheet. So once I'm done with the Format Painter, if I double click to turn it on, to keep it on, to turn it back off, I can just go back up on the button and click to turn it off. So the Format Painter will save you lots of time, and those of you guys who, if you haven't used it before, it's a cool feature that's also available in Word and PowerPoint. All right, so now I want to change the format of my numbers, and unless you specify otherwise, the numbers are what are called general format in Excel. They're unformatted. So I want to make these numbers easier to read. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight all the numbers that I want to change. So I could point at the first number and just drag across to highlight the whole thing. But a cool trick to highlight a bigger chunk of data is to use the Shift key. So check this out. I'm going to click in cell B4 where I've got my Q1 income. And now I'm going to hold the shift key down on my keyboard. As I hold the shift key on my keyboard, I'm going to click in cell F11 where I've got my total profit number. Okay, so that's just a handy way to highlight a large group of cells. Click in one corner and then shift click in the opposite corner. And once I've got all these numbers highlighted, I'm going to go up on the Home tab here. There's a section where I can change the numeric format. I don't usually for a budget I don't want the $ sign in front of everything. I just think that makes it really hard to read the numbers. So a really easy way to read the numbers is to use comma style. So I'm going to find the comma icon up there and click on that, and cool, it will just automatically put the two decimal points for each number and puts a separator for the thousands just to make my numbers easier to read. So I applied the comma style format. Now I just want to show everything in whole dollars. I don't want to show those. The pennies are kind of cluttering things up. So just to the right of the comma style button, there are some icons with some zeros, and if you hover over those, they'll let you increase or decrease the decimals. So I'm going to look for that icon with the zeros and the right pointing arrow, and each time I click on that, it removes one of the decimal points. So I'll click once and then twice, and now I've got all my numbers showing it as whole dollars. All right, so also fairly common with financial spreadsheets is instead of putting $ signs in front of everything, typically what we want to do is just show the unit of currency, whether it's dollars or yen or whatever. We want to show that on the first row and the bottom row. So check this out. I'm going to highlight the top row, just drag across the top row. And then to highlight two non-adjacent parts of the spreadsheet, I'm going to hold the command key down. So I'll hold command down and drag across my bottom row. So or on a PC, it's the control key. But I dragged across the top row, then I use the command key or the control key to drag across the bottom row. So now I've got two non-adjacent parts of the spreadsheet selected, and to change the appearance of those, I want those to show as currency in accounting style. So I'm going to go up on the ribbon up there and click on the $ button, and that will apply the accounting style format, which puts the $ in front of everything. The accounting style by default also shows the pennies. I'm going to use that decrease decimals button to get rid of the pennies. Oops. Maybe it won't let me do that one. It won't let me do that. Oops. There we go. Yep. Okay. All right. So I've got all my numbers, so they're easy to read. A few other things I might want to do to dress up this spreadsheet are to put some borders to make it easy to read. So I'd like a border underneath all the income categories here before I get to the total. So I'm going to highlight the other revenue line there. And to place a border underneath there, if you look up on the ribbon in the font group here, there's an icon that I think kind of looks like a picture window. If you click on the drop down to the right of that, that'll show you some different border styles that you can apply to whatever cells you've got highlighted. So I just want a bottom border, so I'll just choose that option off the list. And the borders are kind of hard to see when you've got the cells highlighted. So if I click away from those cells, you'll see what that bottom border looks like. Okay, and then I also want to put a nice thick border underneath expenses and before I get to profits. So I'm going to highlight my expense values. And then with the expense values highlighted, I'll go back up to the borders button on the Home tab. Click on the down arrow to the right. And if you look further down the list, there's some other options. I'm going to go with like the bottom double border, but pick whatever style you like. And again, you got to click away from those cells to be able to see what that looks like. All right, so just making the spreadsheet a little bit more presentable. Anybody have any questions on the formatting basics? No? All right, so the only other thing I might want to do is punch up that title at the top there. So right now it's just showing in cell A1. A lot of times what you want to do is take a title and center it across all the columns. So I want to basically make that top row one big cell and center my text there. So check that out. I'm going to click in cell A1 and then highlight all the way over to cell F1. And with all those cells selected, check out up on the ribbon on the Home tab, there's a button marked Merge and Center. So you highlight a group of cells and you click on Merge and Center, and it just combines all the cells I had selected into one big cell and puts my title right in the middle of all the cells I had selected. And then I'll go ahead and just bump that up a little bit. I think I'll make the text bold. I'll change the font size from 12 points to maybe 20 points. And gotta have some color, so I'll go back to click on the drop down here, and I'll go with I'll go with red text. And then of course on this campus I should go with a yellow background, shouldn't I? Is that the correct color combination? Am I doing that right? Kind of, sort of. Not like those guys on the other side of town with the blue and the yellow. Anyway, so that's a basic spreadsheet. We're just doing some basic calculations and showing you guys some cool tricks we can do to do some formatting as well. So, who's got any questions or needs any help on anything we're doing so far? No? So total silence means 100% comprehension, or you're just so totally confused you're not sure where to get started. So 100% comprehension. Okay, so hopefully those of you guys who are just getting started with Excel, we're removing some of the mysteries. Some of you guys who have been doing some stuff with Excel, you got a few new tricks here. We're all good with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get a little trickier on you guys here. So I'm going to do want to practice some other calculations and show you some other features of Excel. And so we could do another boring business budget, but I think you can learn. You actually can probably learn more when you're having fun than when you're doing something boring. So instead of doing a business budget, why don't we plan a party? It's already Wednesday afternoon here. Can you almost see the weekend from not here? So let's go ahead and plan a party. So I'm going to create another sheet, but before I do that, I want to give this sheet a more descriptive name than just sheet 1. So I'm going to go down to the bottom where it says sheet 1, and to give it a descriptive name, I'm just going to double click on where it says sheet 1. So when I double click on the sheet name there, it lets me edit it. So this is my budget, so I'll just type in budget as the sheet name and press enter. Okay, and then you can also do color coding. So after I've renamed this sheet, I'm going to do a right click on the tab at the bottom where I've renamed budget, and when I right click, I get a shortcut menu that includes the tab color command. So pick any color you want for the budget sheet here. I'll go ahead and change it to the color of money. I'll change it to green. Okay, and you can't really see the tab color until you click on another tab here. So let's go ahead and after we've renamed the sheet and colored it, I'm just going to click on the plus symbol here to create a brand new sheet. Okay, so I'm on a second sheet here, and let's go ahead and give this sheet a name. So instead of sheet 2, I'll just double click and I'll call it party. Press enter. And then I got to go with some color, so I'll right click on my new party sheet and go to tab color. And I think for a party, I'll make it Fiesta Red. All right, so now I'm gonna use the zoom features in the lower right corner to make this a little easier for you guys to see what I'm doing here. And so let's go ahead and plan a party for this weekend. So I want to plan a barbecue. So I'm in cell A1 in this new sheet. I'll just type in BBQ bash. Okay, and I'm going to skip row 2. I'm going to go down to row 3, and I'm going to type in some column headings. So I'll type in the word item. Then I'm going to press the tab key on the keyboard to jump to the right. I'll type in the word quantity. Then tab again over to column C. I'll type in a column heading here for price. And tab once again. And then column D, I want a column heading here for total. And then I'll tab over to column E. And in column E, I'll type in percentage. Oops. Okay. All right, so once we got some column headings here, your assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to make a list of 6 items that you want to have at your party. Okay, so it could be whatever you want, burgers, beer, Cokes, whatever. Just make a list of 6 items. And I know some of you guys could probably think of more than 6 items, but just so we're all working with the same size spreadsheet, if you would just limit it to 6 items. So you're going to enter from row 4 through row 9, list your 6 items, and after you've listed what items you want at your party, also type in the quantity of each item, and then also type in the price per unit of quantity. So I'm asking you guys to fill in the first 3 columns from row 4 to 9. Okay, so go ahead and have some fun with that. Just type in the list of stuff that you would think of for a party. Okay, this should not be hard.
We're just making up quantities and prices.
Say that again.
Are we just making up quantities and prices?
Yeah, just have some fun with it. It's like, so how many kegs are you gonna have? Right? Okay, is that at the top of your list?
I had tequila at the top.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, there you go. Okay. Okay, tequila. So, okay, that's a party. Okay. So let me see what I've left.
Fiesta, right?
There you go. Exactly. Well, okay, you got the one. You go there. Let's see. All right. So okay. So this looks pretty low key. Oysters, though. That's pretty exotic. Okay, all your usual standard stuff. Let's see. Nobody's got anything really wild going on here. Chocolate. That's a good party. Okay. Okay. This is a PG. You're keeping the PG version. Let's see what you got going here. So tequila.
Tequila,
Oh,
beer.
oh, very good. Okay.
There we go.
All right. And then the quantities are.
Yes. We have a lot of ribs.
Okay. Very good.
And
Okay.
then a lot of tequila.
Okay. So my advice is if you're gonna have a lot of tequila, you should invite the neighbors, because if you don't invite the neighbors, they're gonna invite the cops. That gets complicated.
Right. Well, that's why we got more food than alcohol, so that way people,
Okay, that's a good theory.
Straight on.
That's what you tell the officer, right?
Right. No, you offer them a plate first.
Very good.
Then
Okay. All right. Okay.
talk to them.
Very good. Okay. So beer. There you go. That's a woman. She knows how to plan a party. She starts with the beer at the top of the list, right? All right. So let me just make a list of my stuff. If you're not thinking of anything, you can just got some steak, got a beer, gotta have chips, gotta have salsa, gotta have some soda, and then you're supposed to eat something green like once a month. Isn't that the rule? Is it like once a month? So I'll put in like veggie trays. Okay. All right. And let's see. So I'll have 12 steaks at $9.99. I'll get some beer at $14.99. Get some bags of chips and get some jars of salsa. Get some soda. A couple of veggie trays. Okay, so this is pretty easy, making a list for a party, right? All right, everybody's got their list going here. So now we're gonna do some calculations. Okay, so I want to calculate what the total spend is for my first item. I'm gonna go ahead and click where I want to see the total for the first item, and so this is gonna be a multiplication formula, right? We just want to take the quantity times the price. So to do our calculation, we'll start with the equal symbol. And after I type the equal symbol in my total column, I'm going to click on the quantity of the first item. That's B4. And I'm going to type in the asterisk symbol to multiply. And after I type the asterisk symbol to multiply, I'm going to point and click on the price of my first item. So I've just got this formula, B4 times C4. Okay? And I'll go ahead and press enter. And I'm spending almost $120 on my first item. Okay? All right, and then we want to do the same formula for the other rows, right? So if your machine lets you do it, you can do a double click. That actually did work this time. So double click, it just copied the data down in to the last blank row. Okay.
What was the formula again for the
So I'm just starting equal. Let me go over it again. I'll just start with the equal symbol. Then I'm going to bug my cursor on the quantity of the first item. Okay. Then I'm typing the asterisk symbol to multiply. And then after I type the asterisk symbol to multiply, I'm clicking on the price of my first item. So I've got equal B4 times C4. Okay. And then go ahead and press enter, and that should give you what you're spending the first item. Is that working for you, Joe? You want me to take a look at it? Is it behaving for you? No? Okay. Let me just I'm going to double click to copy that down. Let me see if I can help you. Let me just check what's going on. You're cool. Yeah, just press enter. You're done. Yeah, there you go. Oh, $800 on the DJ. Okay. Okay. All right, and then click in the lower right corner of that cell. There's no point in filling in a double click. You can double click it instead of. Okay, so you can. Okay. You just type in 20 rather than. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So you got a raging party there, man. Let's go over to Joe's. He's got $4,000 of beer. How much do you have of beer?
I don't have 160.
Okay. All right. So everybody's got what the spend is on each item, right? And then we want to add up, figure out what the total for the party is. So you're going to click your cursor at the bottom of the total column, and we could just use that Autosum function to get our grand total for the party. So with my cursor at the bottom of the total column, I'm just going to click on Autosum. It guesses that I want to add up. I want the sum of everything from cell D4 through D9. It guesses I want the numbers immediately above. That's it. So I'm spending about $258 on my party. So how much are you spending?
Mine's the same as yours. So
It's what?
it's the same as yours.
Oh, okay. You're having the same party. Okay, so who's like Joe? So your party is scary. What? How much is it?
Well, it came out to like 50,000, but
Whoa. So let me
but
see.
that's because of equipment and so there's
Equipment.
Well, you can change the numbers here. So you have 1,400. How much something like that? Okay, so you guys know how to throw a party. Okay, 6
Joe's blowing up.
These are big parties. You guys, wow. Okay, so everybody knows how to spend money on a party. This is important stuff to know how to do, right? All right. So any questions on anything we're doing so far?
Is there a shortcut for, keyboard shortcut for automation some?
You know, on the PC it's Alt equal. On the Mac, I don't think there is a key. Hold the Alt key and press equal on the PC. I don't think there is one on the Mac version, unfortunately. All right, so now let's get a little tricky, you guys. I want to figure out where all the money's going. I want to figure out what percentage each of these items is of the grand total. Okay, so to do that, to figure out the percentage of the first item, I want to take basically the total for the first item divided by my grand total, right? That will figure out the percentage. So let's go and get our cursor where we want the percentage for the first item to show up. And we're going to do a simple division formula. So I'm going to start with the equal symbol. Then after I type the equal symbol, I'm going to click on the total of the first item. That's D4. Then I'm going to type the slash key for division. So we type slash to divide. And then I'm going to click on my grand total at the bottom of column D. So that's D10. So my formula is just D4 divided by D10, right? I'll go ahead and press enter. Your number probably comes out different. I came out like 0.465, so that's about 47%. Okay? So instead of showing that as a decimal value, I want to display that as a percentage. So I'm going to go back on that formula and just click on the percent style button up on the ribbon. And that just converts that to a nice clean round number. Okay, so I should be able to just copy the formula down and I'm done, right?
You are. But you should use it.
Let me get to him and then I'll go ahead. Do you have a question or comment?
Okay. So in case you did not have that over there and you wanted to make it a part of the formula because like if you wanted to multiply it by 100 Why using the division symbol? How would you do that?
Run it by me again. So you wanted to.
My bigger problem is this is a very simple equation. Let's say if you get into more complicated things, let's say you want to solve an algebraic equation which has multiplication, division, addition all in the same formula. So let's say if you wanted, you use the division symbol here, you did D4 divided by D10.
Okay.
And now you wanted to make it a percentage, let's say by multiplying it by 100.
Okay.
How would you make it a part of this formula without using that? Using the function.
When you say using a function, it's a very specific thing. Where this is a formula, so you just could take that same thing and multiply it by 100 if you wanted to.
So I would use parentheses.
Let me. Well, okay. So here, the thing is, you want to just show this instead of 0.46, you just want to move the decimal over a couple points, right? So I could just bug my cursor up here, type asterisk to multiply, and type in 100, and I'm done. It's like, is that how you want to display it?
So why did it not multiply D10 by 100 first and then divide by D4?
Well, okay, so what I think the question you're asking and the kind of the point of this is what we call the order of operations.
Yes.
So yeah, Excel always wants to do multiplication, then division, then addition, and subtraction. So some of you guys maybe remember from school, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So it's always wants to do the stuff in the parentheses, then the exponents, then the multiplication. And so in this case, it's just taking D10, because it's multiplying first, it's taking D10 times 100, and then dividing that, using that as a divider with D4. So in this case, we didn't need parentheses, but sometimes when you do more complicated calculations, I think that's where you're going with it. You need to control the order of operations with parentheses. But in this case, we did pretty much exactly what we want.
Yeah.
Let's see, did you have a question or comment?
No, I mean, like if you use automation field, then you have to put the dollar sign.
I'm sorry.
To do percentage.
Say that again now.
If you want to do percentage, then I mean you should put the dollar sign in the D10 one, because you don't want.
Well, if I just change the dollar sign, that won't really affect this equation though. Yeah. So here I've got this set up as a decimal. Then I changed it. I went to the percent style button. Now, if I copy this down, do you think that's going to work? Did any of you guys try it already? It blew up on you? Okay, so I wanted you guys to see the problem. So things were going so smoothly to this point, right? And then you copy this down. Now, if I get on this percentage for the first item and I double click to do a fill down, I get all these error messages here. So what's up with that? Oops. So remember that idea I threw at you guys of the idea of relative addresses earlier, where Excel, when you build a formula, when I did this D4 divided by D10. So Excel is not thinking of those specific addresses. The way I created this formula, Excel is thinking, oh, he wants to take the number that's one column over in the same row, divided by the number that's one column over, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows down. And so if you go look at these are divided by 0 errors. Anytime you see something that starts with a pound symbol like that, that tells you it's an error message. If I click on the first error message, look at the formula up on the formula bar. It's D5, which is what I want here, divided by D11. What's in D11? Nothing. Okay, so I'm trying to divide by 0. So again, when I create my first formula, Excel is thinking, oh, he wants to take the number that's one column over in the same row divided by the number that's so many rows down, and it maintained that relationship when I copy the formula. So earlier, when we copied our formulas, it automatically adjusted the relative references. Here's an example, you guys, where I want the reference to the first number, D4, to change to D5 to D6, but I want the reference to my total in cell D10 to show and stay exactly the same as I copy the formula down. So we want this to be what they call an absolute reference rather than a relative reference. Okay, so a good way to kind of see what's going on here, you can click on each individual cell But a cool trick to see all the formulas in all the cells, check this out. Go to the Formulas tab. Click on the Formulas tab. On the Formulas tab over to the right, there's a button marked Show Formulas. That's kind of a cool feature in Excel. If I go to the Formulas tab and click on Show Formulas, look what happens. Oh, now I can see all the formulas in all the cells. So this is a really cool trick. A lot of times when I get a spreadsheet from somebody else and I'm trying to understand what's going on, where the formulas are, I want to see the formulas. I'll use this also like what we're doing right now, trying to troubleshoot. So see how each of these formulas here for the percentage automatically change. So D4 changed to D5, D6, and so on. That's cool. But the D10 changed to 11, 12, 13. So here's an example where when we copy the formula down, I want one of the references to be relative, so it'll change, but I want my reference to my grand total to stay absolutely the same. I don't want it to change, okay? So let me go ahead and turn off the Show Formulas option. Okay, and I'm going to do an undo to get back to where I was. I don't want these formulas, so I'll just do undo to clear that out. So here's a key thing. Before you copy the formula, if you want one of your cell references to stay the same as you copy it, you want to change it so it's an absolute reference rather than a relative reference. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up on the formula bar. I'm going to click up on the formula bar where it says D10. And it doesn't matter. I can click at the beginning, the middle, the end, or as long as my cursor is closer to the reference to D10 than the reference to D4. To change this from a relative reference, which means it's going to change when I copy the formula, to set it as an absolute reference, there's a couple different ways to do it. On the Mac, cool keyboard shortcut that you probably want to write down right now is Command T. Command T will change it from a relative to an absolute reference. On a PC, you can use the F4 key. I'm running on a Mac a MacBook right now, and unless you've customized the keyboard on a Mac, you can't just press the F4 key by itself. If you want to use the function keys on the Mac, you've got to press the FN key if you're using a MacBook, FN and the F4 key. So on a Mac, it's Command T or FN and F4. On a PC, it's just the F4 key. So when you do either of those things, what happens to the cell reference? What does that do?
You push dollar sign.
Yeah, so the dollar signs tell Excel when you copy the formula, don't change it. So if you don't remember the keyboard shortcut Command T or F4 on a PC, you can always manually type the dollar signs in there. That's okay too, but the Command T or the F4 key on a PC are just good keyboard shortcuts to remember. Okay? So once I've got that set up, I'm going to go ahead and press the Enter key. And that doesn't change my first formula, but now check it out. If you copy the formula down to the other rows by doing the double click trick again, now all your formulas are going to work. Okay, and if you go back on the Formulas tab and click on the Show Formulas button, you can see how the reference to D10 didn't change. Okay, it stayed the same. You set it up as an absolute reference. So that's a really important concept in Excel when you're copying formulas, this idea of relative versus absolute references. You saw in our first spreadsheet when we copied the formulas, it adjusted everything, and that was exactly what we wanted. Now I threw you guys an example where we don't want one of our cell references to change in the formula, and so we needed to lock it in as an absolute cell reference.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
How we did that?
Yes.
You want me to repeat how we converted from a relative reference to an absolute reference?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to turn off the Show Formulas option here. I'm going to do some undos here. Okay, so now I've got this reference to D10 as a relative reference. There's no dollar signs. So what I did is I clicked on the cell where I want to change the reference from a relative to an absolute reference. Then I'm going to go up on the formula bar and I'm going to click on the reference to D10. So I'm just clicking up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Then once you're up there on the Mac, you can either use Command T or you can also use the F4 key. I think you're going to have to hold the FN with the function 4 key. Okay. Okay, and it put the dollar signs in there for you? Okay, so yeah, so once you do that, you got the dollar signs in there, press the enter key. That won't make any changes to that formula, but now if you copy the formula down to the other rows, now it should work for you for each of them. Okay? Anybody need any help with that? This whole idea of relative versus absolute references?
Are they interchangeable? Like, can I use Command T to realize?
Yeah, Command T on the Mac. You can use Command T or FN function 4, which I think you're going to have to hold the FN key and press 4. Yeah, either one will work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean like from relative to absolute.
Yeah, it just switches it from relative. The dollar sign just means don't change it when I copy the formula. Okay, and you can, if you don't remember the keyboard shortcuts, you can always manually just type the dollar signs in there. Okay, so now we know where our money's going.
Yeah.
Okay, so what percentage did you figure out there, Stephen? What percentage you're spending on tequila?
It is 34%.
There you go. Okay, so see, this is important stuff to be able to analyze, right?
Responsible buying.
Say again.
It says responsible buying because we're not putting all of our tequila in one basket.
Okay, very good. These all sound like alibis. You're going to tell the cops when they show up, right? Oh, I'll believe it. All right, so anyway, we're just having some fun with it, doing a party budget here, but that whole idea, the bigger thing I wanted to get across is that whole idea of relative versus absolute cell references. So I'm going to put up because I think that's really an important concept in Excel. Let me put up some slides to go over that. I'm just going to scroll through a bunch of stuff here, so I'm going the wrong direction. Yeah, so check this out. This what we call relative, absolute, mixed cell references. So the only time you care about this stuff is when you're copying formulas or functions. Okay? So the default in Excel is relative cell references. And what that means is when you create a formula that refers to another cell, it's based on the relative position between the cell that has the formula in it and the cell that you're pointing to. Okay? And what that means is when you copy the formula, the cell reference changes. And so you saw when I was throwing that example at you guys on the first sheet, when we were copying from quarter 1 to quarter 2 to quarter 3, it was changing it for us. And those are all relative references. And in most cases, that's exactly what you want to have happen when you copy your formulas or your functions. But then what we just took a look at with the percentages here is where we've got absolute cell references. So what that means is you've got a formula that refers to a specific cell address. Okay, and what that means is when you copy the formula, the cell reference does not change. So we saw how you could use the F4 key or Command T on the Mac or you can put the dollar sign in there manually yourself. So A1, that's a relative reference. $A, $1, that's an absolute reference, which will not change when you copy the formula. Okay. All right, so anybody have any questions or comments on that one? If you haven't, if this is all new to you here, sometimes I can see some of you guys kind of thinking this through. It might take a little time to digest it. Usually it's when you copy the formula and it doesn't work, it's like, oh, I know what's wrong here. I have to change this from a relative to an absolute reference. Okay, so does anybody have any questions or points of clarification on anything that we're doing here? No? All right, so that's all good. You guys will have questions tomorrow. You'll be thinking, I should have asked that guy a question. So, all right, I'm going to throw another cool feature at you guys here. A real powerful feature that's built into Excel are called tables. And if you're managing lists of information, tables are really cool. Tables have lots of cool features. For one thing, tables make it easy to do some nice formatting on a spreadsheet. Also, tables make it easy to do sorting and filtering of data. And they also make it easy to create formulas. So some of the stuff we just went through with the relative versus absolute, I want to show you how doing the same thing in a table would save us some trouble. So let's check out how we can take this example we've got and work with tables. So I want to leave the first three columns here, columns A, B, and C, but I want to get rid of column D and E, and I want to show you how we can do those columns with tables instead of just creating the formulas like we just did. So let's go ahead and delete some data here. I'm going to point at the column heading for D, and as I point at the column heading for D, I'm going to drag over to column E. So I've got both of those columns selected, and I just want to get rid of everything. I don't want to just press the delete key because that'll keep the formatting. I'm just going to delete everything in those columns. So I'm just going to right click on either of the columns I've got selected, and after I right click on either the column headings, in the shortcut menu that appears, I've got a delete command. So go ahead and choose delete and get rid of all that stuff. Okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and click anywhere in my list. Now, I want to convert this list into a table. So before you tell Excel that you want to treat a list as a table, typically you want to have a one-row descriptive column heading. And best practice usually is to leave blank rows all the way around. So notice I left row 2 blank. And so if you have blank rows all the way around, it Excel's pretty good about guessing where your where the data is that you want for a table. And also when you're converting a list of information into a table, you don't want to have any subtotals or grand totals. So I got rid of everything here. I just have just the raw data. Okay, so to tell Excel to treat this as a table, check it out with my cursor anywhere in the data. There's actually a couple different ways to do this. One way to do it is to go to the Insert tab, and on the Insert tab, hello, my machine is slowing down here. There we go. On the Insert tab, in the first group here, there's an option for Table. So I click my cursor on one cell in my list, then on the Insert tab, I'm going to go ahead and click on where it says Table. And when I do that, I get this dialog box. Excel wants to know where the data is. So based on my cursor position, it guessed everything out to the first blank row and first blank column. And then also it noticed that the stuff in the top row looks a little different, so it guesses that I have a header row. So that's all good. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and cool, that's a table. So first of all, it did some nice formatting for me. Okay. So that's you can save yourself some time. And by the way, we haven't talked about it, but you guys are all sworn to secrecy about how easy this stuff is to do. So if somebody says, "Well, that's a really nice looking spreadsheet," that must have taken you a long time to do all that formatting. You can't just tell them, "Oh, well, it took me 2 seconds. It's a table." Just say thank you. Don't give away all your magic tricks, right? So check it out, you guys. There's a new tab up there that wasn't there before. Remember earlier I talked to you about what they call contextual tabs? So that table tab only shows up when I've got a table selected. So check out what I mean. Click your cursor away from the table. Okay? Where's your table tools go? They disappear. So some people say, "Oh, I can't find my table tools." Well, you got to click back in the table. Okay? So when I click back in the table, on the table tab at the top there's lots of cool styles. So I can just point at these different styles and click on them to change the appearance. And if you click on the drop down below the styles, there's just a whole bunch of different table styles that you can work with here. And we won't get into it right now, but you can even create your own new table styles. So you can do custom styles. So everybody these days is into their corporate branding. So like companies, it's not just red, it's our specific color red. So if you wanted to, you could create a nice table style for your company's branding, or if you're working with clients always like to see stuff formatted in their own corporate colors. Okay, so pick whatever style you want. I'm kind of still feeling like I'll go with kind of green here. Okay, so the first thing working with tables is the styles are really handy. Now notice also there's some different options here. So for example, there's a checkbox for banded rows that gives you alternating colors. I think that looks really nice and makes it easy to read, but if you don't want that, you can just turn off, I'll just temporarily turn off the banded rows. Okay. or I can click on the checkbox for first column and it just quickly formats the first column of data for me. I'll turn that on and then turn it off, or I can click on the checkbox for last column. It just formats the last column, or I turn that off and I'll go to banded columns and it just does the columns in alternating colors. So you can just click on the checkboxes to do some fast formatting. I'm going to go ahead and turn those off. Now, I'm going to turn on banded rows again. So let's go back and take a look at what difference it makes when I do the calculations in a table versus the way I did it earlier. So I'm going to go over to the right of the price column heading, and just like earlier, we want to calculate the total. So I'm going to retype in my total column header. So I just type in total here and press enter. Oh, that's cool. Look at that. When you add a new column or new row to the table, it automatically auto-expands it. So I didn't need to mess with formatting. The formatting's already done. Notice I get another smart tag over on the right there. I can click on that. And if you don't want it to automatically expand the table, you can turn that off. Personally, I think it's a real handy feature. Okay, now let's see, after I've got my new total column in there, I'm going to do my calculation just like I did earlier. We want to calculate the quantity times the price. So just like earlier, I'm going to start with the equal symbol. Then I'm going to point and click at the quantity of the first item. Oh, look at that. Instead of using the cell address, when you're in a table, it creates what they call a structured reference. So it just picks up the column heading instead of the cell address. So the quantity, I'll type in the asterisk on my keyboard to multiply. And then after I type in the asterisk on the keyboard to multiply, I'm going to click on the price of the first item. And there again, I get another structured reference, quantity times the price. Okay? Go ahead and press the enter key. And cool, it automatically copies the formula down. So I save some more time there. Excel figures I'm working on a list. I want to do the same calculation for all the rows. So again, it did that for you. If you don't want that to happen, you can click on the smart tag there and have it undo that. Okay, so you can see for formatting, for adding columns and rows, for copying formulas, Excel tables give you some powerful features. Now I want to calculate my grand total. So check this out. Instead of using the Autosum function like we did earlier, when I'm in a table, I'm going to go up to the Table tab if you're not there already. And on the Table tab, there's a checkbox for total row. So I click on the checkbox for total row and boom, it automatically does a calculation on whatever the last column of data is. So it just assumes that you want to add up the last column of data. So instead of creating a formula, I just hit a checkbox. So are you guys starting to see how, if I tell you if you're not using tables, you're working too hard? If you're managing a list of information in Excel, you got to use tables. So when I turn on the checkbox for total row, what happens is it wants to automatically do a calculation on whatever the last column of data is. And if the last column of data is numeric, it assumes that you want to get the sum. If the last column of data is non-numeric, it'll assume that you want to get a count of how many items you want. But you can actually do a calculation on any column. So check out if I go to like the quantity column and click on the total row, I get a little drop down arrow at the bottom of that column on the total row. I can click on that and look at all the different kinds of calculations I can do. So there's a whole bunch of what they call aggregate functions to summarize my data. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the sum function.
One question is that when I do that, I only get the sum for some reason of the price, even if I click on the total.
Well, just click your cursor in the total column, and you get a drop down. Okay, so click down here. Hang on here, just click on the checkbox. Choose sum. You got it. So I think what happened is it possible that you turned on the total row earlier? Yeah. I bet you turned it on earlier and then turn it back up. So it just remembers at the time that you first turned it on what the last column of data was. So it probably guessed that you want to add up the price. All right. So cool. So we got all kinds of we're doing our calculations here by just hitting a few check boxes. Everybody good with that so far? Now let's go back to that whole percentage thing. So I'm going to go ahead and click my cursor to the right of the total column, and I'll type in the percentage column heading here again. And again, once I type in a new column heading and press the enter key, it's going to extend the table for me, which is good. Michael, you look like you got a question.
Yeah, how did you do that again?
So I just started typing. I just typed in the word percentage and I press enter, and it should actually in this case, because I didn't undo it, it's not going to do it again. Let me go back here. Yeah, so if I go ahead and just click in a new column here and just type in percentage and press enter, it should automatically expand the table for you.
Okay.
All right. So now let's go ahead and do the percentage calculation. Again, I want to take the total of the first item divided by my grand total, Gesundheit. So I'm going to start my formula like always with the equal symbol. Then I'm going to click on the total of the first item. And again, when I click on the total for the first item, it creates a structured reference. Where's my mouse? My Mac is falling asleep here. Come on. There we go. So it refers to the total column. I'm going to type the slash key to divide. And when I type the slash key to divide, now I'm going to click on my grand total at the bottom of column D. Okay, so it makes reference to the row heading, the column heading, another structured reference. I press enter. And check that out. Because I use the total row feature, I don't even need to think about that whole thing of absolute versus relative references. It assumes that I want to divide by the same grand total each time. So the only other thing I might want to do here is highlight my numbers in the percentage column, and then on the home tab just go up to percent style. Okay. So tables have some very powerful features for formatting, for doing calculations, for automatically expanding the table. Like I said, if you're managing lists of stuff, you definitely want to use tables. And now that another cool thing I can do with tables, you can do sorting and filtering without a table, but that's kind of built into tables. So check it out, you guys. At the top of each of these columns, I've got a drop down, and if I want to sort my items alphabetically, for example, I can go to the item column, hit the drop down, and I've got some options for sorting and filtering. I'll click on ascending, and that puts my beer right at the top of the list where it should be, right? Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and figure out what item I'm spending the most on. So I'm going to go to the total column, click the drop down, and I'll do that in descending order. And that tells me that I'm spending more on steak than anything else. So the sorting is pretty cool. Okay, a lot of times with lists we need to do that. And then I can also do some filtering. So maybe I want to see just the items that I'm spending more than $30 on. So if I go to you notice right now when I'm sorting, I have a little drop down arrow on that column. If I go to the total column and click on the drop down again, I can do some different filters here. So I'm going to go to filter and I'll choose greater than. And depending on what kind of numbers you typed in, type a number that makes sense for the data that you've got there. But I'm going to see everything greater than $30. Okay, press enter. And cool, check that out. It filters the list to just those items. I can see at the top of that column, a little funnel icon gives me a visual cue that I'm filtering on that. And the other cool thing, you guys, is that because I use the total row, the grand total here just shows me the total for the items that I'm displaying here. So it recalculates that. So that's another cool feature. It's very dynamic. So the ability to sort and filter data is a real powerful analysis tool that's really built right into tables. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my filter here. I'll go back to filter and I'll go ahead and just go back to choose none. Choose one, clear everything out of there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this sort and filter dialog box. All right, so when you guys go back and you're hanging out later tonight and said, so what was that Excel class all about? You said, well, we learned how to plan a party. That's fun stuff here. So no, we're just having some fun with it, but this whole concept of the relative versus absolute and the table stuff is some pretty cool stuff that's built into Excel. Anybody have any questions on anything we're doing or need any help on any of this stuff?
Yeah, I have
Yep.
one. Like,
Yeah.
why do the sum here, but when it sorts, then the number just goes, like, if I do this end.
Okay, so
Yeah, then the total is goes
Yeah,
to
yeah,
there.
so-
I'm wondering like in which way I can
So-
do this correctly.
click on let's see, click on the total, the zero there. Let me see what's in the right in the zero there. So you use the sum function rather than using a total row. So what I would do is get rid of that row. Just delete that row. Yeah. I would right click on that row. And you just right click on the row. And yeah, okay. Then click on the list here. Click anywhere in the list. Just click on one item in the list. Anywhere, yeah, right in there. Yeah, that's good. Click on one of the items anywhere in the list, and then go back to the table tools and use the checkbox for total row. Use that rather. So yeah, that's the difference. I think So if you turn the total row on, it will be dynamic. Whereas when you just use the sum function, so it doesn't recognize that as a separate piece of data. All right, so now, actually, we don't have that much more time together. So, if you guys have any questions at all, this is the time to ask and make sure.
Can you just go over like the percentage for this one, because that obviously is a little bit different than just what we had.
Yeah. Okay. Let me do some undos here, Joe. So, if I'll go ahead and just get rid of my percentage column completely. Okay. So you got your total row, right? I'm just going to right click on this column and just demonstrate doing that again. So I'm going to go over to the right of the total, type in percentage. That extends the table. Okay? And then from here, Joe, I'm just creating my formula by typing in the equal symbol. Then I'm clicking on the total of the first item. And then I'm going to type the slash for division. And then after I type the slash for division on the keyboard, I'm going to click on my grand total. So as I do that, it's creating these, as they're called, structured references to the cells because it's in a table.
So how did you get the ground or to the lower? How did you do that again?
I'm sorry.
When you got the ground to the lower percentage, how did you do that?
Okay, so let me undo that. So if you just type in a column to the right or type in a row at the bottom of a table, it should automatically extend the table for you. So all I did there, Joe, is just type in a new column heading and then press the enter key, and it should automatically auto extend. Is yours? Okay, and then I create my formula. I just go equal, click on the total of the first item, slash for division, and then I click on my grand total. I should be able to press enter on the first one, and it should copy. Oops, it copies everything down there. What did I just do here? Wait a second here. It's just hard for me to talk and type at the same time sometimes. So let me try that again. All right, so I'm going to go equal. Click on my first item, type in slash, and then click on my grand total. There we go. So that should do something like that, and then they show as decimals, and then from there, Joe, I just highlighted all those values and just changed them to percent style. My machine is a little slow here. It's falling asleep on me. Okay? So the last thing I wanted to throw at you guys is another cool concept in Excel, and I'm just going to kind of put this idea in the back of your mind and have you guys explore it. So imagine, we talked about when we're in this table, we have different table styles, right? So in addition to table styles, we also have what are called cell styles. And instead of changing the color of a cell and changing the numeric style and the font and all that stuff, there's a whole bunch of predefined styles that are built into Excel that you can use to quickly format a spreadsheet. You can customize those styles, and you can also create your own styles. So let me show you an example. I'm going to go ahead and click on my title at the very top here. And actually, I think I'll highlight all the columns. I'm going to take this top row here, and I want my title centered. So I just highlighted everything from A1 to E1, and then remember how earlier on the Home tab we used this merge and center option to combine that all into one big cell? Okay, so once I've done a merge and center, to use one of the predefined styles that comes with Excel, look on the Home tab over on the right side, see where it says normal, bad, and good. Those are all examples of styles. If I just click on like good, see how it applies the formatting for that? If you go over to the right of those styles and click on the flyout there, or click on the down arrow, I should say, so you can see a whole list. Look at all the different styles that are available. So the cool thing about styles is you can format really fast and you can have consistency. So here I'll go ahead and change the style here to like 60% accent 6. Okay? So see how I'm able to just quickly change the format of that cell? By using a style. So they're a fast way to format. Now check this out. Let me show you another example of using styles. I'm going to go ahead and click on the, I'm going to click in a blank cell over to the right here. And I'm just going to type in some stuff. So literally I'll type in stuff here. Okay? So I want this stuff to look just like my title. Okay? So I'm going to use the same style. I don't even need to think about what color did I use, what font. I'm going to go to my styles here. Click on the down arrow. I use that 60% accent 6. So now both those cells look exactly the same. So that's another, you can do formatting really fast and be very consistent by using styles. Okay, now check it out. Maybe I want to change the appearance of those. So instead of reformatting individual cells, I can redefine the style. Michael, do you have a question or comment?
Yes. What's the difference between changing the cell style and changing the background?
The style, well, the background is just part of the style. In fact, let's explore what's part of that style. So to understand your question, to understand the answer to that, Michael, let's go back. I want to redefine what the style looks like. So I applied the 60% accent 6. I'm going to right click on that style up on the ribbon, and when I right click on it, check out, there's an option to modify the style. So I'm going to right click on modify, and that puts me in this dialog box. So you can see here, Michael, here's all the different pieces that you can control with the style. So in this case, this style that they've got defined here is only controlling the font and the fill. So the fill is part of the style. It kind of goes to what you're just asking here. So I want to change the look here. So I'm going to click on in this modify cell style dialog box. I'm going to click on format. That puts me in this format cells dialog box. But check it out, I'm not just changing individual cells, I'm redefining that style, so everything in the entire workbook that uses that style, I've got this kind of global control over. So I'll go ahead and change I'll go to the font tab here, and I'll change the font from 12 points to, maybe I'll bump it up to 16 points. I'll make it bold, and then I'm going to go to the fill tab here. And in the fill tab, I'll change the background color from a light green to maybe blue. Okay, so I changed the font, and the color here. Now if I click on OK, and then OK my way out of the dialog box. See how I changed both pieces? I didn't need to go to each individual piece. So by using styles, you've got this kind of global control. So I always say the larger your spreadsheet is, the more you want to use styles to kind of control the overall look. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
So in a sense, when you're dealing with the same type of information over and over again, and you're making the same modifications to the background and everything like that, it's easier to use a style.
Yeah, styles will just give you, like I say, global control. And here we're doing relatively small spreadsheets. You know, in business situations, people create these crazy big spreadsheets, and then somebody says, you know, you should change the color of that. Well, if you didn't use styles, you'd be going back and you could spend a lot of time, right? So styles are really a strategic way to format your spreadsheet. So if you're not using styles, you're working way too hard. Okay, and styles are a feature that's not only available in Excel, but if you guys do work in Microsoft Word, there's styles in Word too. It's the same concept. So I'd encourage you guys to explore that. Here's another concept. I'm just going to give you one more idea, and then we're going to wrap it up, and you guys can go home and just chill out for the evening. Right? But there's another cool thing in all the Office program called themes. And imagine you're working on a whole series of different spreadsheets for a project, and you want them to all look consistent. Or imagine you're working on a project where you've got some documents in Excel, some maybe budgets and proposals in Excel, and you're also doing some other documents, reports or proposals in Word, and you're also doing some stuff in PowerPoint for this project, and you want all this stuff to look the same. So a bigger concept than styles is the idea of what we call themes. So check out, if you go to the page layout tab, you guys, in the page layout tab, the first command is themes. If you click on themes on the page layout tab, look at all the different themes. Now you may not realize it, but every new document that you start in Microsoft Office uses the default theme, which is called Office. But you can change the themes to one of the predefined themes. You can even create your own themes. And so if you click on the drop down where it says themes, you can just click on some of these different themes and see how it changes the look of the document. Themes consist of colors, fonts, and if you're using graphic objects, it'll also include special effects like shadow and reflection and so on. So there's just a ton of different styles that are available. So see how I'm able to quickly change the look of the overall document by changing styles. So in addition to the overall theme, I might also want to mix and match colors. So to the right of where it says themes, you can click on the drop down for colors, and they've got all these predefined color schemes. Okay, so I can choose a different color scheme, and then I can even choose some different font families. So they've got different font families. So here I picked a basic theme, then I chose some custom colors and chose some custom fonts. Now, if I want to reuse this same look in another document, I can just go back up to themes, and there's an option to save current theme. I could save this theme, give it a name, and then I could reuse it over and over again in other documents. So once I've come up with this custom theme, it's totally reusable. So you can have consistency. So this whole idea of tables and table styles, cells, cell styles, and then themes are all cool tricks that you guys can use to not just get the right answer, but to make it all look really good too, which you find in some businesses, if it looks good, it must be right. Isn't that, you find a lot of places, especially if you're like in the entertainment business or the media business, all those guys are heavily into their color and stuff. So, but it's better to have the right answer and to have the whole thing look good too, right? All right, so I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. You guys got some new tricks you're going to amaze and astound people with, and you're all sworn to secrecy about how easy Excel is. To maintain the idea that Excel is a complex and advanced program, and people who know how to do this stuff should be highly paid, right? Don't tell anybody otherwise.